Lethal equipment has been part of Call of Duty since the very beginning of time, starting with World at War. Not the very beginning, but I wanted to exaggerate a little. You could pick which lethal equipment you wanted on your class instead of just taking a frag grenade or two into the battle. Which lethals were not very lethal? What's up, everybody? Jimmy or Chaos, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to go over my picks for the 10 worst lethals in COD history. If it's been classified as lethal equipment at any point in COD history, it's eligible for this list. So you let me know in the comments what you think the worst COD lethal is. And remember, if it's not on this list and you happen to comment it, it could end up in a viewer version of the list on the channel later. Drop a like, and let's start off at number 10. The Molotov Cocktail in World at War. We all know what the Molotov is, and we know what it does. But how many of you attempted to use it back in World at War? Better question. How many of you actually remembered this was in World at War? Because even if you were playing this game back in the day, absolutely nobody was using the Molotov over the sticky grenade or just the standard frag. This version of the Molotov actually behaved pretty differently from the mollies that we use now. The World at War molly, well, it had to directly hit somebody in order to kill them. It was basically impossible to kill someone with the fire on the ground because of how little damage it did and how quickly it burned out. In fact, there was even a little disconnect from the pool of fire from the molly and the actual hitbox on that fire, meaning after a second or two, the fire would literally stop dealing damage even though it was still on the ground, so you could just walk right through it and nothing would happen. The molly would get significant buffs in later COD games, but the World at War version was pretty terrible. I think it's a good way to start this list. Another good way is to remind you guys that the pinned comment below this video is a giveaway for a PS5. That's right, at 2.8 million subscribers, we're giving away a PS5. Multiple ways to enter, they're all free. At number 9, the Thermite in Black Ops 3. Another fire-based equipment piece that everyone knows and loves today. But it had to be heavily reworked from its original appearance in Black Ops 3. You may have forgotten, but I'm going to remind you. The original Black Ops 3 Thermite was lame, and if Modern Warfare 2019 hadn't completely reworked this equipment into something else, it probably would have just been deleted from the franchise. The BO3 Thermite was basically a frag grenade that would explode into little fire bursts once it hit something, meaning it had the same trajectory and throwing animation as a standard frag. So you couldn't do that quick, super straight throw into that modern Thermite that you can do with modern Thermites. You had to get a nice arc while also sitting through the whole pull the pin animation like it was a frag grenade. The modern COD Thermite is much more lightweight, much more agile. It's a good piece of equipment because Infinity Ward completely reworked it in Modern Warfare 2019. Now this might be a hot take, but I think the Black Ops 3 version of the Thermite was really, really bad. There's no reason to take this thing over a Simtex or a C4. At number 8. The Spike Drone in Advanced Warfare. Now, Advanced Warfare had some interesting lethal equipment, mainly because they were loaded into your exo launcher and you felt like a boss shooting them out of your hand. The Spike Drone was meant to be the AW equivalent of the throwing knife, or even the combat axe, featured a very small hitbox, but enough damage to grant you an insta-kill. There was also that neat little bonus trait where the Spike Drone would be recalled to your wrist and you could kill somebody with that recall animation if you aimed it right, or if you timed it right, that is. So, why is it on the list? Well, because the Spike Drone was just way too hard to use in a game with jetpacks. The animation, it was kind of long. The trajectory, it was awkward. It just wasn't fast enough to keep up with that fast pace of movement in the game. It was super satisfying to actually hit someone with the Spike Drone, but out of all the throwing knife type lethals in COD history, I think this is probably the worst because it just wasn't fast or efficient enough to be worth taking into battle. At number 7, the C4 in Modern Warfare 2, the original. Might sound strange because now we think of the C4 as one of the craziest lethals in the game, and we all associate it with super aggressive playstyles, but back in the original Modern Warfare 2, the C4 kind of sucked. When you hit the throw button, your character would toss out that normal but throwing range super low. I mean, it was more of a deliberate placement than an aggressive tool that you were probably used to, and it also ran the risk of killing you with the explosion if you detonated it too soon on top of all that. So even though the C4 became a crazy part of COD, and even though Modern Warfare 2 was a crazy game, this version of the C4 was pretty lame. At number 6, the Seeker Grenade in Infinite Warfare. Who remembers this little guy? Seeker Grenade was actually a little four-legged drone. You would toss it out, it would run around the battlefield till it found an enemy player, at which point it would run up and explode. Think Hunter-Killer, but on the ground. Sounds cool on paper, but there were fatal flaws that got it on the list today. For starters, the AI, it was kind of dumb. It was super inconsistent. Sometimes it would beeline right at somebody from 30 feet away. Other times it would be right next to an enemy player and just ignore them. On top of all that, it was really easy to avoid. Once it locked onto someone, it would make a loud beeping noise and the target would get a big red indicator on their HUD once it got within a certain radius, at which point, all you had to do was hold down the thrust jump button and you fly right over the explosion. It was cool to have a little killer spider drone on your side, but more often than not, it didn't kill anybody. It was awesome when it did get somebody, but that only happened about 10% of the time. Way too easy to avoid, and like I said, the AI was kind of dumb. Now we arrive at the top 5. The throwing knife in COD Ghosts. Now, Ghost had a time to kill that was faster than almost every other TTK in franchise history. Also had maps that were wide open and massive, made it really difficult to get close to enemy players on a consistent basis. So tell me this, why would you use a throwing knife? This version of the throwing knife was the same as always. It was satisfying if you landed a kill with it, but the problem was the fact that it was way too difficult to get yourself in a position where it could actually be used. 99% of the time, you would get killed by your target before you could even finish the throwing animation because the time to kill was just way too fast. There wasn't much practical use for a throwing knife in this game. The map design, the time to kill, it all puts you at an insane disadvantage every time you try to use it. Therefore, it's on the list today. At number 4. The impact grenade in Black Ops 6. Now, the impact grenade can be useful from time to time. It's usually just going to get a hit marker or nothing at all, though. Grenade is light, can be thrown quickly with the main benefit being that it explodes immediately upon hitting something, so if somebody's weakened, you could toss it at their feet. You could immediately get a kill. However, the impact grenade also had the smallest blast radius out of all the lethals in Black Ops 6, which made it basically useless in most situations. You can't throw it across the map at an objective. You can't throw it at someone behind cover. You can't use it to flush out people from choke points. You can only use it to finish off a weakened enemy. The only way to get a one-hit kill with the impact grenade, you guessed it, directly impact someone with it. And how often does that happen? Not very often. At number 3, the Molotov in Modern Warfare 2 2022. Now, it's the same Molotov as always, but here's a few key flaws that are specific to this game itself. You throw it out, makes a bunch of flame on the floor. Use that as an opportunity to lock down area or deny entry to a certain room. But the problem with the Modern Warfare 2 molly is the simple fact that the damage it deals to people standing in the fire wasn't high enough. The map design of this game was too campy. It was open to allow for something like this to be super effective, but it was also entirely countered with a single perk. I usually really like the Molotov Cocktail in Call of Duty, but there's been some bad ones, and Modern Warfare 2 makes the list for that. It's not like the Molotov itself was a problem, but in the context of this game, it just wasn't very useful. You hardly ever saw it online. At number 2, the Canister Bomb in Ghost. Who remembers this? It had an interesting concept, but it was so awkward to use and almost impossible to get consistent kills with. It was a grenade that had to be primed for a long time before you could throw it, and you could only throw it a short distance. This thing must have been super heavy. If you managed to actually get the prime completed and throw it off the side of a building or something, the explosion was big. It could do some damage, but 9 times out of 10, you would either get killed while priming it, or you wouldn't throw it far enough to escape the blast radius yourself, and you would kill yourself in the progress. Now, it was a neat concept for a lethal equipment, but it was just way too niche to help anybody. And just to add insult to injury, the map design of COD Ghost made this thing basically useless because this was an equipment piece that was only useful if a bunch of enemies were clumped together. That also never happened in a game where the maps were this big. It was a big swing, but it was a big miss. And at number 1 today, the blast shield in Modern Warfare 2, the original. Yes, this was technically lethal equipment, so it's eligible. And out of all the lethal equipment in COD history, Modern Warfare 2's blast shield is easily the worst of the worst. Unlike everything else on this list, the blast shield didn't actually deal any damage. Instead, when you hit the right bumper with the blast shield equipped, your character would just slap on some extra armor that would protect them from explosives for a little bit. That was it. It was literally just flak jacket, but in the lethal equipment category for some reason. You had to manually turn it on instead of it just being a perk in your class. And on top of that, when the blast shield was active, you would lose your minimap. So please, someone explain to me why anyone would take the blast shield on their Modern Warfare 2 class over a Simtex, the frag, the claymore, the throwing knife. I mean, somebody make that argument down in the comments because I want to hear it. The blast shield was reworked into a perk later in COD games, but for its one appearance as a lethal, it gets the number 1 spot because it's the one and only lethal equipment in COD history that you couldn't kill anybody. And that's on top of being useless and awkward in almost every situation. Let me know one lethal that wasn't deserving of making the list. I'll see you guys soon.